Welcome back to the Max Your Dash podcast. Thank you for listening, liking, and now watching. I am your host, Steve, as usual. Nathan Alvarez is back with us again, our co-host, and we have a new face.
Oh my God,
Adam. Wah, 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 wah.
MBLE.
Should we give him you want to give him an intro, Nate?
We didn't talk about giving him an intro.
Yeah, who is Adam?
Yeah, who's Adam?
Who's Adam?
This guy?
Wow.
Adam, say hi.
Hello, family. How are you?
I love that he got all dressed up for this today too, and I just rolled in.
Yeah, Nate rolled up in a t-shirt. Adam's got the suit coat on.
I literally said because of pod day that I had to dress up.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Adam is another advisor on Dash Capital. He is married to his beautiful wife Meg, has 2 young children, and he is one of the most family men.
Family men. Yeah, he is
that I've ever met in my life. Hence why he's on this episode today.
Yeah, dude, that's a good point. Yeah, we really are using you for your that trait for this episode.
Yes.
Before we get into what today's episode is, though, you know the drill. We're doing Max Your Dash moments. If you're new here, Max Your Dash moment is when you are feeling pure joy, fulfillment, happiness. What were you doing when you were happy last? What was it? What were you doing? And we just go around, say those last moments since the last time we did a podcast episode, start off with some good vibes.
Yeah.
You got one, Nate?
I actually didn't prepare, so let me do the mental exercise here. When was the last time I felt pure joy? Since Adam's here, we played golf and had dinner together for the first time this season on Tuesday for Men's League, and I mean, I always say Adam is my what do I always say? It's like you're my best
worst friend.
Yeah. Like, because he's always too big. He's always got something going on. He can't hang out. He can't do stuff. So when I get the opportunity to have dinner with Adam, I really enjoy that. And we had a great time, I think.
Oh, it was a wonderful time, man. I feel honored to have this intro
really
and being a Max Your Dash moment. Jeez,
dude, that is true because Adam is kind of like, you don't really get to spend much time.
Best worst friend.
Yeah, that's a nice thing, bad thing to say.
That's right. I don't really have the responsibility of the best friend.
The other way around. But worst best friend. That's probably a better way to put it.
I appreciate that.
Friend.
But I don't have the responsibility of the best friend. And when I show up, it's fun. It's an honor. But I don't have you breathing down my neck to hang out all the time.
Well, I mean, that's actually probably your loss, but whatever.
That's right.
Okay, you're up.
I actually have an awesome one that I've been waiting for this to happen. This week, right? The weather in upstate New York has turned around, and I have walked my 2 daughters to daycare and school every day this week, and it's been awesome. So that's been a really big goal of mine in the summer months to walk my daughters to school. So, and I don't know how many more I'm going to be able to do that. How far away is that? It takes me about 40 minutes round trip. So about 15 to 20 to get there, drop them off, do all, and then 15 to 20 back.
And they got to be there by what time?
I usually get there by 8, but 8:30 would be the latest.
That's a nice little start to the day.
Yeah.
Birds chirping, squirrels running around.
Yep. They're
Nature,
yep. We saw a little bunny.
You have the dogs too?
Funny. I haven't brought the dogs with me, but I do have one of those belt leashes. So I'm pushing the stroller with my kids, and then I have 2 dogs around my waist. I get a lot of looks coming through.
You're a dad.
Men in New York.
Yeah. You're literally dad.
Pure dad mode. So that was mine.
I would say, so you guys know I'm an uncle. And when you like, when your family starts like having kids, everyone gets their own name. Like my mom's name is Mimi and my dad's name is Bappa, and I'm Uncle Stevie.
Whoa.
And so my niece, one of my nieces who's like almost 1, she doesn't say a word, doesn't say anyone's name, but she'll say like dad because like D's are like easy. But the other day I was with her and she said Steve. Ooh. And I was like one of the first ones, and my sister called me and she was like, it was the weirdest thing. We were like talking and she was just like Steve. I was like, hey, must be doing something right.
Great uncle.
That's cool. You put the effort in.
That's a great one, yeah.
Like I say, I always get like there's no responsibility of being a dad, but I get all the cool things of like hanging out with a kid before they get on your nerves.
Well, even our kids are gonna grow up saying Uncle Steve.
Uncle Steve. Yeah. Max or Dash moments, check. What are we talking about today, and why we said it was great to have Adam on this episode? One, we just wanted him on here, but he fits this topic perfectly. Financial literacy for kids. Financial literacy is super important, obviously, for anyone, but because just think about the impact you can have on anyone's life, even the community, if financial literacy for kids was like so important. I kind of want to get into this too, is like how it's not taught in schools at all.
Yeah.
Which we didn't even talk about that when preparing for this, but that's like another huge thing. Like imagine if there was so much emphasis on it while you were growing up. Imagine what you would be like as a person financially if you were taught all this stuff when you were younger. So that's what we're going to talk about today. For a lot of hopefully our young families who are watching this, maybe you come away with some like cool ideas that you can start teaching your kids about an importance. A lot of this stuff, we're going to really have a checklist of stuff like, okay, you should teach them this, this, and this. And here are some good ideas of things you can implement with like cool ideas. But that's the topic we're going to talk about today. I think it's super exciting. It's on a lot of minds of young families, especially in today's day and age, I feel like. So that's what we're getting into today.
Yeah, I think our goal is to help our listeners and watchers kind of understand like what are the foundational items that you want to make sure your children understand as they're entering the workforce for the first time ever.
Yeah.
Right. And like you said, it's kind of crazy that this stuff isn't really taught in school, right? Like we'll get into the topics, but you know unless you have parents that teach you great financial habits as like a teenager, where do you learn this stuff unless you're just personally really interested in it or something?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's something that impacts every human being every single day. We all make a money decision daily. So we should probably have some knowledge about how to do it right.
Right.
And, before you're 55 years old.
Yeah. No, I've thought about this topic a lot, and 100% that I feel like the education system does not align to some of this important teaching, right? Which then falls on the parents and the team around them, right, to help teach the next generation.
Yeah.
Right? And it's super important because a lot of this education can change the path of the family, right? And I think that's really important to teach kids at a young age, because I don't know about you guys, but the most valuable things I've learned were through mistakes, right? And if I made those mistakes as a teenager versus in my early 20s, I'd probably be ahead of the game. So
yeah, you said the word habits. Like imagine if you started these, like you're saying, we're going to talk about this, but like you had these habits in place before you get your first job or before you graduate college or before you get your first car. Like you have those habits in your head, or at least the mindset of the right things to do. It's like, I don't know about you guys, but I just figured it out myself, I guess.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah.
Like my journey with money was, I remember like going to college and trying to fill out my own FAFSA and stuff like that. And I'm signing up for student loans that I had no clue what interest rates were or how much my monthly payment was even going to be. I mean, like literally didn't know at all when I'm signing up for student loans. Like, what am I going to be paying like when I get my first job? And that's just like one tiny sliver of finance. And so we can do better.
Yes.
We can do better. Parenting is one of the hardest things in the world to do, but I think all parents would agree that one of the things they would want to accomplish as a parent is to teach their children how to be successful with their money. I can't imagine there'd be somebody out there's like, yeah, no, that's not important. Why does that matter?
Right.
So
while we were developing this, we thought of this question. What are the skills you would want your younger self to have when it comes to managing money? So we kind of like backed it in, and then we thought, okay, these are the most important ones foundationally you should think about teaching your kids. So we're going to go down this list. It's not a big one, but these are the most important ones, and we think we have some cool ideas around it. First one we came up with was budgeting, which kind of goes in with like the value of $1, stuff like that. But I think like Do you think budgeting is really the first one you can probably start like teaching them about, which kind of goes hand in hand with like the importance of saving and stuff like that? But you think budgeting would be first?
I do, yeah. I think understanding the value of a dollar would be the first thing I would want my son to learn, like that money doesn't just grow on trees and that we only have so much of it and we have to budget for things. And by having a good accounting system for your own cash flow, that's one of the few things in personal finance that is truly controllable, and we want to do the best we possibly can at controlling the controllables. So yeah, I think budgeting and teaching your children at a young age that money comes through mom and dad going to work and there's only so much of it to go around, and how we allocate it is super important. But by the way, that's like tough. Like I said, parenting is really hard, and there's a lot of times in parenting I'm learning now where it's like sometimes you just want to give in, and like my son's crying because he wants to hold this thing that was on the counter that I don't really want him to hold, but he's having he's having a meltdown, so I just give it to him, right? You do this a lot as parents where my son's too young now, but where he's going to want stuff. He's going to want new shoes, new cleats, new clothes, new computer, a cell phone, all this stuff. And I think every single time that you are going to be making a purchase for your child, it's an opportunity to educate them on how we got this money to buy this thing. And it's an opportunity to teach them the importance of allocating your dollars and budgeting. But it's easier said than done, We got a truck driving by.
Yeah, go on.
No, I think that is super important. I think I would add to that with it creates the discipline and habits that you mentioned before that carry into when major decisions are being made too, right? Understanding how a budget works. I think a big one is the cash flow. I really don't think people in general, I think adults don't understand cash flow and how that works personally or through a business. And so I think giving them that general knowledge will allow them to make really good decisions, right? When it comes to buying their first house or their first car or, going to college.
Yeah.
Right. And understanding kind of what that looks like.
So, what's the first major purchase you make as a kid? Probably buying your own car if your parents aren't helping you, right? Or like major purchase.
Yeah.
You think?
Probably.
Well, so should they be being taught this stuff before they have like their first like part-time job, you think?
Yeah. I think that this is a great discussion. Like, I don't know when's the perfect time. Like, when are they ready mentally to understand this stuff? But I think it's as early as possible is the goal, to teach your child how money gets created and how much of it there is to go around and how important it is to manage it responsibly. Because I've seen, and I'm sure you guys have all seen this, where as a kid, if you grow up and you always got everything you ever wanted, right? And you never really understood how money works. You get to your first paycheck and it's really hard to all of a sudden then become somebody that's a super conscious spender.
Yeah.
So you blow through your 20s without really even realizing it, like how many dollars are being wasted, because you just have this habit and this mindset of like immediate gratification and getting everything you've been since you were 6, you got everything you ever wanted. And that can be a dangerous habit to carry into your professional life. A lot of times I think that's where people get to age 30 and they have a lot of regrets that they don't have more money saved, or maybe they've accumulated more debt over the years than they can handle, and that can create all kinds of problems. I think a lot of that, what happens to you in your 20s with your money will have a lot to do with the way you learned money, from age 10 to 20.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And those habits and the understanding of how money works. So I think the opportunity for parents is at the youngest age possible that you think, like, where you feel comfortable explaining to your child, like, when Grayson wants to buy a toy, someday, like I want to take that opportunity to kind of share with him how this works,
right?
So that he can start to get it. And sure, maybe that's tough for a while where he doesn't like that conversation, but it's an important one,
right?
to be teaching. So,
and I think it's a lot younger than you think too. Everybody thinks like when you get your first job or whatnot, but these questions start coming up at 10, right? Like I have nephews that are already understanding, right? Oh, this person has this car versus that, or this toy, or this house, or that, an understanding kind of, and then you get into, like you mentioned, like the wealthier families, right? That can really provide everything for their kids, and why, I would kind of push not to do that, right? Because then you go through your whole teens, and you go, even if you have a job, I don't have any bills. So what I do, I spend that on whatever I want, instant gratification, and then all of a sudden you get out and you're out of college or you got to take your first bill, and you don't understand like, oh, I can't go just buy everything I want. So,
and as a parent, you love your child so much, you care about them so much, you want to give them the world. Like that's just kind of natural, and you should do that. Like, but the opportunity we're talking about here is to take a step back, educate them on how money works, where this money came from, how you had to go and work for this, and that there's only so much of it to go around. So let's have a budget. And I think that was one of the ideas that we were brainstorming in the beginning is like, imagine even when they're 10, right? Let's just use that example. Like, what if you, Adam, like when Alessi's 10, you sit down with her at the beginning of the year, like you do your own finances, and you literally set a budget for the year. Like, okay, Alessi, this is how much money mommy and daddy have to allocate towards things that you want this year. And so every time, that she needs something or wants something, new shoes, new clothes, whatever, you can then update that budget. Like, here's how much we spent year to date. That sounds crazy, kind of, right?
It does, yeah.
It sounds a little crazy. But just imagine if you did that every year for Alessi from 10 to her first job.
Right.
What did you think? How much better prepared is she going into the workforce?
And again, I think about this a ton because that's 100% right. Like my wife and I, right, we have that monthly finance meeting that we coach our clients to.
Monthly finance meeting.
That's right. A little shout out to monthly finance meeting. But I think it's important to get the kids involved to that. Right. And do they need to know the ins and outs and be in the stresses of finances? No. Right. But do they need to understand like the process of how I work with Meg and how we work as a team, right? And how we manage money together? Because to be honest, having a couple in a marriage too adds another factor of money management, and to be able to make it fun as a family. And like you said, build budgets and allowances and teach as a family, I think is extremely important through those meetings.
Like kids are so observant. Yeah. Like yesterday I've been trying to teach Grayson how to wipe his own nose. And it's just unreal. Like you grab a tissue and you wipe your own nose and then you hand him the tissue and he wipes his nose. They just want to be like you.
Yes. Yeah.
So imagine they're observing their parents openly talking about money, having monthly finance meetings their whole life. They're seeing that. And it's something that absolutely is going to transfer with them.
It is our personal development guru. How important do you think it is for them to understand the importance of savings? I feel like they have to, on some level, understand the importance of having a goal. Because if they want to, like, let's say, they like buying little things here or there. Maybe they want to buy a pair of Jordans here or there. But then their bigger goals, they want to buy a car or maybe an Xbox or something like that. If you don't have that goal for buying that bigger item, you don't understand the importance of why you need to save and budget and not buy that smaller purchase.
Yeah.
Right. So do you feel like you understand the importance of setting goals is important with that stuff as well?
Absolutely. I think kind of coming back to that budgeting conversation we were talking about where you set a budget annually with your kid. Now that I'm thinking about it more, it's kind of genius. But like goals too. So like imagine you as a parent with Alessi, you guys have every year this like 5-year plan, right? Of, okay, 5 years from now, you're going to be driving. So we know we need to have $5,000 saved for your first car. So you back in the math. You're teaching her how to do this. Those skills are so important for her to become an adult and be self-sustainable and good with her money. So I love that. Like mapping out these big goals, working your way back to, okay, this year, here's what we're going to execute on. And I'm not talking about like Christmas presents, like that stuff you as a parent, you'll decide to do, but like sitting down with your child and saying, okay, what are things that you want this year? you know, and Grayson might say to me, Dad, I really would love some Jordan sneakers. Like, okay, you can have those, but that's going to eat up a third of your budget. So we're going to have to sacrifice somewhere else over here.
Yep.
Teaching him that is going to be crucial. Yep. And I can't wait to have those conversations, by the way.
Yeah, me either. Again, it's difficult because you want to give them everything, especially at the age group that our kids are in. It's kind of like you want to give them everything. They look at you, and again, I have 2 daughters, so they look at me with those eyes, and I'm like, yes, whatever you want, right? So it is tough, but I think, you know, some mistakes, and again, easier said than done, that parents, you know, do, and I see this like in a grocery store in like a Five Below or somewhere, right, where the kid is kind of freaking out and being like, I want this, and the parent immediately says like, we can't afford it, or something. That's like the narrative.
Yeah.
And I think switching the script to the goal side of things, of not saying, hey, you can't afford it, right? It's more of, we need to save for it.
Yeah.
Right. And kind of now saying, okay, the child, or, you know, my you know, Alessi or Mira is not like, oh, my dad just can't afford all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
When it's more like, no, I have to work and save to get that. And it doesn't need to be a huge item, right?
One of the things that'll be tough, I imagine, too, is like, you're going to be the only dad making their child do this. So they'll be talking to their friends like, my dad makes me do a budget every year.
That's like, I was about to say, like, Grayson's going to go to school when he's 12 and be like, dude, my dad made me go over this budget last night.
It's in a monthly finance meeting.
But this is what makes... This topic's about financial literacy for your kids, but it's also financial literacy for parents. Like, this is what makes finance hard, is that there's a lot of emotions and behaviors tied into this stuff. Like, when your kid is begging you for that toy at the store and is going to have a meltdown, it just is a lot easier to give them what they want so that they're not screaming and crying and embarrassing you in front of everybody.
Yeah.
But that behavior, in my opinion, and look, I'm talking like I'm some expert. I've one child, but that behavior starts somewhere else, probably. Like, if you're teaching them the value of $1 and how this all works, and then they're in that store and they want that thing, and then imagine instead of saying yes or no, it's okay. Are you sure you really want it? Because now your budget just went from $500 to $480 for the year. Are you sure you want it? If you want it, that's fine. We got to update the budget though when we get home. Yep. Yes, Dad, I want it. Okay. When you get home, you update the budget. Now they know they only have so many dollars. Like, you change the conversation a little bit.
Yeah.
I think that if you did that consistently, you know, probably around age 10 till they go off to college, they're going to become great budgeters.
And I think it's important to say that, you know, we're in this field, right? We talk to clients every day, you know, and we see the value of this, and it's tough for the general, you know, population to do this with their kids, I would say. And I think this is a value that, you know, advisors can bring to the table, right? Where I think it would be really cool to see a program like that we create or something for kids in their teens, right? And educating them and kind of taking some of the load off the parents, because a couple of my clients have asked that, right? And say, hey, I have a 16-year-old who's about to drive. We're trying to save the car, and he just doesn't understand any of it. He just assumed that I was going to spend 10 grand on this. Yes, we have it saved, but I don't like that, right? And so,
but why does that happen?
Yeah.
It starts at Little League Baseball, getting the bat you wanted, and the cleats you wanted, and never had a conversation, right? Like, and it's their whole life, right? It's just, I asked for it, I got it. I asked for it, I got it. Now I'm asking for a car. Where is it? So it starts somewhere way before then, you know, training that mindset. And that's another thing that is hard, is like, for parents, you know, comparing and contrasting with other parents and in the way that, you know, if your kid's the only kid on the baseball team that doesn't get a new bat this year, like, that's hard as a parent to say no to. Really, really hard. But the problem is that parents, I think, they'd rather just not have that fight or that conversation and just, you know, get it for their kids. And then it gets to that situation where it's like, now, okay, they want a car and they just don't get it. Like, the money doesn't grow on trees. So having that conversation as early as possible so that you're training them before it gets to those awkward moments, I think, is what we're trying to encourage here.
Yeah. And even if it's a yes, Okay, you're going to buy the bat anyway. Let's have a conversation about it, right? Because then
it's part of your budget.
Yep.
There goes $150. You're down to $350 now.
I think we've established that budgeting and the importance of saving is the foundation of the foundations of the stuff that you should start teaching them. Start
I have
there.
one other thing to add to this really quick. We talked about this, I think, before, but it also might be an opportunity to get creative too with like, if you're going to set a budget with your child or whatever for the year, like think of other ways you can incentivize them to grow that budgeted amount through the behaviors you want to be seeing, right? Like if it's good grades in school or whatever, maybe you can start to up those budgeted amounts, stuff like that.
Yeah, and have fun, right? Kids, like, it can't be this like, oh man, we got to talk about this again. No, it should be fun. Like, even if it's like the goal side of things, they're saving for an Xbox, right? And my wife and I can be saving for the family vacation, right? And we, and we can do this together, and have a lot of fun with it, because I feel like the narrative a lot of times is finances boring and stressful, don't want to deal with it. And I think that, again, we need to flip the narrative, especially at a young age when they have the opportunity to build really, really good habits and disciplines.
Yeah.
I think that the next thing that we decided that was important, like kind of the next level up of stuff, was having a basic understanding of how investing works. And I think that this probably is, you got to wait until they're a little bit older. I'm curious when you think, like, we obviously don't know the exact age, but you probably can't start teaching them about this stuff when they're like 10 or 11, can you? Probably like a little bit older. Because like, if you think about what are the things that you don't have to talk to them about asset allocation, stuff like that, but they need to know about compounding interest and how like growing your wealth long-term works. Very basic.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, when can they grasp that? And when do you think is a good time to start teaching principles like that?
Well, yeah. Think about when you started like learning algebra, right? And trigonometry, like these math that you probably have never used since.
Right.
They start teaching them
like 10th grade
in high school for sure.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it almost needs to be like a financial literacy along with your high school curriculum, but by the family. Right.
Yeah.
And can you teach this to the 10-year-old? No, we talked about the habits that you could, but once they're starting to learn that in high school, I think it's extremely important.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even think about that. You're definitely learning some crazy formulas and stuff like that in like 10th grade about a triangle. No, you could definitely understand how compounding interest works.
Yep.
Well, if you begin with the end in mind, so let's think about when you're 21 and you're getting your first job, what is the behavior you want your child? What do you want to see your child doing when it comes to investing at that age? To me, what comes to mind is like, I want them to be motivated, like when they get that first job, to be putting a minimum of like 10% of their paycheck away into their 401ks or investments or whatever. Like, I want them to be excited about that. Like, that's one of the first things they're gonna sign up for when they get that first job. So how do you get there, right? If you work yourself back. If I'm trying to get my child to be motivated and excited to invest, they need to understand how investments work and what this can become someday, right? They need to understand compounding interest, like you're saying. And I think the best way to motivate them is to like show them, like,
right.
If you invest $100 a month from age 10 to 60, how much do you have?
Right.
Like that would kids don't get the chance to even learn that. So I think that would be stuff that I would be wanting to talk about. And then they also need to understand though that like the risks involved with investing, right? So how do you teach that?
Yeah.
What do you guys think?
We said hands-on experiment. Let's say they like sports or something like that. Buy like Nike stock with them and just like track how it goes, because you're going to see the stock go up and down and they're going to be like, why is this losing money? Why is it getting better? And I think that's like because it's something they can get excited about probably. But like, it's a way for them to kind of see how the market moves over a short period of time, and then over a long period of time, what it looks like too.
Yeah.
And I think that gives you an opportunity to then start discussing behavior. Right. If you buy Nike and a couple other stocks, right, and they do like last year, right, and what is your child going to want to do? Oh, I can't lose this, and do like a typical behavioral and that really can guide that discussion of how the behavior impacts the investing and whatnot. And I think it becomes a lot of teaching moments, investing together, right? And doing something like that, like you said. So
I also love the idea of like coming back to setting goals. If your child is 10 and maybe you set a goal that we're going to invest a certain amount of money to have enough money to buy your car at age 16. That's kind of fun too, where it's like, all right, maybe you figure out like, okay, a car is going to be $10,000, we think. How much do we need to be investing each month with what growth rate to get there? And then what should you be investing in? And you start to like, we do for our clients, right? Like your financial planning. Again, those lessons, and you make it fun. You try to make it as fun as possible. Maybe you have a quarterly finance meeting with your child or something where you look at like how the investments are doing, or maybe it's like, it'd be really cool if it started to become a conversation you're having pretty regularly, like every week where, it'd be cool if Grayson's asking me like, Dad, how's my stocks doing? Like that'd be fun, right? What you're trying to do is get them interested in it. Like kids get very interested in things. And so I think you just kind of need to like show them the way, and then they'll probably start asking a lot of questions and want to get to know it all. But what would get me excited, right, when I get my first job is to truly understand like the long-term payoff of investing and how wealth can really be created by having that discipline of putting a certain percentage away every check. Like that's what we're trying to get at. So parents need to just get creative about how you're going to teach that, but it's important to teach that. The last thing I would want to have happen is have my kid getting their first job and then asking me, Dad, should I do a 401k? How does this work? Like, I just don't know how this stuff works.
Right.
That is what happens most of the time.
Yeah.
100%.
And then they don't sign up, or they do what? They do like 3% or something like that. And what you do in your 20s from a compounding interest standpoint those are the most important years.
Yeah.
So we need them ready to go. As soon as they get that first job.
The compounding interest example is like so huge, even for adults when they see that, like, oh, if you put $100 away, that's why they always say start early. But if you put $100 away a month for 30 years, this is what it looks like.
Hey, you know what we're going to do on the fly? Keep talking.
Pull up the calculator. So, dude, this is perfect. But my thing is, like, do they care? Like, maybe in their 20s, but when they're younger and they're like, oh, cool, I'm going to put $100 away and I'm going to have, like, $2 million when I'm 60. Do they care, though? Like, they're going to see $2 million and be like, all right, that's fake. Or, like, you know what I mean? Like, are they going to care? Are they going to think that's actually cool?
I think that's a great question, because I think, I think you're right, where if the conversations haven't been had, right, and they walk into, a 22-year-old, like how many times when we started our like practice, like you were talking to a 23-year-old, they're like, cool, like whatever, I would want it now.
Yeah, I'm like jacked up showing them they're going to have like $5 million at 65, and they're like, they almost like don't even think it's real, but they don't know. Imagine you're showing that to like a 15-year-old. They have no clue what $1 million could do for you.
Yeah. I think if the discussion's been had throughout their early years, like they can get excited about in their 20s, understanding what, like, hey, this is what the necessary steps are to accomplish. And I think something that I am planning on teaching Alessi and Mira, right, is like having that freedom, right, where finances is a tool for more freedom, right, and to be able to buy back your time a little bit, because I feel like our best savers and clients, or at least mine, they have a financial freedom day that's well before 60, right? And how do you strive to do that, right? To buy back their time of like, okay, now I don't have to be the traditional 9 to 5, right? And getting excited about like what it can create in that avenue too.
Yeah, I think if they're not like, and that goes back to what we talked about, the first thing you should teach them, if they don't understand the importance of a dollar, they're never going to understand why investing is important or even cool in the first place.
So this is interesting. So I just did a quick compounding interest table here.
On our website?
Yep, on our website. If you put $100 a month away starting at age 10 until age 60 at an 8% growth rate. So if you just $100 a month, all of those years, never increase it, you'd have $750,000 at 60. And that's amazing, right? You only put in 60 grand. You got $750,000.
Right.
There's probably some energizing conversations you can have there with your child when you
certainly.
But what I think about is like, let's use myself as an example. I'm 35. Okay. So if my parents had done this with me when I was 10, right, I'd be 25 years into this table. So if I go to year 25, I would have $100,000 in this investment account right now. How would that change my life today? What would that allow me to do? What businesses maybe could I start with that? What real estate could I be in a position to buy because of that? Like it's going to create, and that's just $100 a month.
Yeah.
That's not
crazy.
like adding more over time. So I think I don't know that you'll necessarily get your child to be like insanely motivated and jacked up about it. But if you're having this conversation with them consistently and you actually do this where you set up these accounts and you show them how it's going and whatnot, again, they're so observant, they're so curious, they're going to ask more questions. And I guarantee that when they get their first job, they've had all these conversations with you about compounding interest, they see what's in this account now, they're going to save more money than they would had you not done that.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to get to, is the behavior of saving and investing as much money as you can afford.
And I think there's a lot of avenues that can kind of open up in this discussion of things that could be taught or maybe should be taught that isn't taught in the education today, right? Like taxes, right? That's a big one too, of like understanding taxes. And I had this thing in my head that I think it probably
this
sounds
was a good
crazy.
idea.
This sounds probably crazy to people, but if you give your child an allowance, right, like clean your room or whatnot. I remember when I was younger, I would mow the lawn and my dad would give me 50 cents. And I would be like, this is crazy.
50 cents?
Yep. And he'd go, I got 25 cents when I was younger. So you get 50, right? And,
What the heck are you going to do with 50 cents?
It was ridiculous to think about. But again, to kind of go back to like, hey, if, Leslie cleans her room, she gets X amount and, you have like the chore chart or whatever. Then go to Leslie, right? And take a percentage of that.
Yeah.
And make them understand about, okay, I give you $10. I'm going to take two.
Yeah.
Right. And then again, that almost forces also families to save. I'm going to put that right into her account or save it for her. Right. Anyway. But now she understands a little bit about how taxes work. And that opens up that discussion too.
Yeah.
Because I remember talking to even family members and clients getting their first job and being like, oh my gosh, all my money's gone. Like, this sounds, I'm like, right. And not understand that. And to be honest, that was me as well of kind of not understanding the tax side of things.
Yeah.
Going into it.
The tax reality hits you hard if you don't, you didn't even know it was a thing.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Dude, I don't even know if like when I had my first job at TJ Maxx, when I got the paycheck, I probably didn't even know. I just never knew.
I do kind of remember, I kind of actually can remember like every time I get a paycheck being disappointed that it was only what it was because of taxes.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I when we first at the Northwestern days, right, when we first were 1099 the internship, I didn't save $1 for taxes, right? Didn't even think about it, and I was still dependent, right?
Yeah.
And I owed, like my dad's like, well, you owe, like, or he was kind of describing to me, and I'm like, I had no idea. And then even the first year out, I didn't understand having to save for your taxes.
That goes with what you said in the very beginning of the episode, though. You learn through the mistakes if you're not taught about this stuff.
Yes.
I think like the taxes, and the other one that we were talking about, Nate, which I think is like the last thing that you maybe teach them. I think this goes with the taxes that Adam brought up, is like understanding how credit works.
Yep.
That's super important if you want to like one of the big things is obviously buying a home. Understanding how credit works is like paramount to that. But I think that's like we talked about. That's probably like the last thing that you would teach them.
Yeah.
Amongst the other stuff, you think?
Yeah, I was just going to look up like how old do you have to be?
I believe it's 18.
I think it's 18 too.
But you can get
like
you can co-sign or
you can get like a
authorized user.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I had a couple of like my clients who were like doing that they were like an authorized user to build credit on purchases they made.
Yep.
Yeah. So again, begin with the end in mind. When your child is entering the workforce, getting their first paycheck, what do you want them to know about credit? To me, I would want them obviously to understand what a credit score is, how it gets created, right? And ideally, I'd want them to have some credit already. Like, I don't want them to be getting their first job and wanting to go buy like the first car, or they got to sign a lease for an apartment or something. They have zero credit, so then they got to go get co-signers or whatever to make anything happen. You can have a good credit score right out of college if you do it right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I think around that age of 18, is a great opportunity for parents to be getting a credit card for their kids that they are on as well, to help start building credit and teach them how this stuff works. Just like we're talking about everything else, like actually make sure you're having the conversation. Like, okay, you want to buy new shoes? We're going to put it on the credit card. We have to pay it off before the statement balance or before the end of the month, so that there's no interest. That creates the opportunity to explain to them how interest works. Yeah. And then you're also building credit for them, right? So this is super, super important though, because like when I graduated college and I started having all these student loans and everything like that, like I had no clue how all this stuff worked. I didn't even know how you could even look up your credit score, you know? And then all of a sudden one day you get surprised where you're like going to try to buy something and finance it. And, you know, like your car insurance is based on your credit score. So there's a lot of things, you know, if you want to buy a house someday, you need to understand how this stuff works. So I think this is a huge opportunity, and you could probably even teach it at a younger age. We talked about this a little bit where, you know, maybe you create a way where your kids can buy things on credit from you. You're the bank. I'm the credit card company. My kid is the customer, and they have to pay me back plus interest or something like that. You know, there's some cool ways you could probably teach how all this stuff works through that. But what are your guys' thoughts on ways to teach credit?
No, I think that that's a cool idea. The stuff we're talking about, though, is like what you're saying is like it seems crazy, but you got to think about the impact on what that would have done for you. Like if you that had done, like what would your situation look like today if that stuff was done for you when you were growing up? Like it seems crazy to do, but only because it wasn't done for you. It's not like the normal. But dude, I like that idea of like.
Well, and think about today. So if you have children that are actually entering the workforce today in this environment, like with how high rates are now and stuff, like, and if you don't know how any of this stuff works, and you're getting a credit card for the first time that's like 25% APR, and you don't really know, like, oh, whatever, I can go buy this computer I need and I'll just pay it off over 6 months, and you have no clue how that actually nets out to like a crazy dollar amount you're paying in interest. Yeah, you need to understand that stuff beforehand, and I would say like you could, I mean, the earlier the better. But definitely, like from, you know, once they turn 18 is a great opportunity for you to start teaching your kids this stuff.
Yeah. And I think it also opens up the conversation to just all debt, right? Credit card's a big one, right? But understanding like good debt, right, versus bad, and understanding kind of how do you leverage debt properly, right? Everybody views debt as this just awful thing, right? But it can be used very strategically to build wealth, right? And educating them. And that's more probably a later conversation, but 100% make it, you know, a game, right, for when they're younger, for the credit side of things, like a credit card. And there's some cool platforms that have come out, you know, to help with this. I think like Greenlight came out with like a debit and a kid's debit and credit card system. Like that, I always looked into that, and that was like cool stuff to help them teach and automate things. So I think that is that part of the foundational things that you're teaching at 10? No, but is that probably one of the biggest conversations you need to have as the child gets older? 100%, because it's a little scary, the environment we're in now, right? And how much credit and personal loans and these debt that's are out there, right? For people in their 25 to 40, that's really hindering. And then it kind of brings up the student loan side of things too. Right? Yeah. How you make those decisions at 18 without parents' guidance of being like, oh, here's $100,000 of debt.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say it's important for kids to learn how a credit score actually gets created. Yeah. Like teach them what debt to income ratio means, and teach them before they, you know, if they're going to be having student loans, they need to understand that, like, okay, so you're going to have this loan payment. That's $500 a month. Your income is $50,000 a year. Your debt to income ratio is roughly 10% or whatever already with just that. Yep. You buy a car, now you're at 15 or 20%. You buy a house, you know, and most lenders are not going to let you go beyond 45%. Yep. So just basic stuff. Like, so to kind of summarize it, because I think we've kind of hit a lot of this stuff. Like, if your child graduates college, or whatever, whenever they get their first job, they understand budgeting the value of a dollar. They understand how investments work and how compounding interest works, and they understand how credit works. They are set up for success. There's still a lot of other stuff to learn, But that foundation is amazing.
Yeah.
And I can speak for myself. I didn't have that. And it would have changed a lot about my life.
Yeah. How would your life be different if that happened? Right. Is huge. Right. Like my background's a little bit different. Right. Where finances were like quiet more. Right. We didn't really discuss it, but I never had to worry. Right. Which is a blessing. But it would be interesting if the discussions were there, right, of what these decisions were made, or the education pieces, right? That would have been a huge learning opportunity for me. And where would we be, at 22, not making some of these mistakes? So.
Even if you don't implement the stuff we talked about, like becoming the bank for your kid, trying to teach them the credit, like buying a stock with them, even if you don't do that, just the conversations alone, I feel like would just be so important. So they're not blindsided. By this stuff when life starts to happen and they get older. Like just having the conversations and, like you said, planting that seed in their head, the curiosity is going to hit them and they're going to want to learn more.
Yeah. And it can literally change the path of their entire life by just doing this.
Right.
Like, unfortunately, it is what it is. Like, money's going to play a giant role in how your life goes.
Yeah.
So, this type of stuff, setting your kids up for success this way, could be the difference between them. Like, think about how different the paths could be and how wide the gaps could be.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
The path they'd be on if they didn't know it versus knowing this stuff.
Yeah.
It can be a game changer. So, and it's crazy, right, that it's not in the education system, but like, parents, let's take extreme ownership and teach our kids how to do this stuff.
Yeah. And I think a big point that you brought up, Nate, was having the discipline to like, we use the budget as an example of like, okay, do you really want this, right? Your budget went from 500 to 480, right? And learning that, how to make decisions like that in a crazy, world, right? Where there's an attack on your wallet, right? So easy to buy things all the time.
Yeah.
Right? Nate says that all the time. Is imagine how ahead of the game where your friends and colleagues are making these decisions and you're able to kind of say, whoa, this decision, I don't make this decision because of this, right? And because unfortunately you kind of follow your friend group and colleague group, when you're younger, and that could lead to issues down the road if you weren't able to sacrifice and learn those things. Yeah. So I think that's a huge point of the discipline side of things, but it can change the whole trajectory of your family.
Right.
And I think it's so important for parents to take ownership of that, right? Because I'm guessing the only person that wants your child to do better than them is your parent. As a parent.
Yeah,
right?
We're not saying if you don't do this, your kid's going to be in a bad situation. But like Nate said, the only thing that can come from this is good. Like you can only essentially accelerate their life moving forward. Yep. I would say, like, learning about this stuff, because when you do learn about this stuff, your finances just get better, everything gets better. So I think we touched on a lot of good stuff.
I think it was
budgeting, importance of saving, basic understanding of investing, talk a little bit about credit cards and taxes and stuff like that. But I think that's a good place to start if you're thinking about this, if you're a young family and stuff like that. So
yeah.
Any last things you wanted to add?
No.
No, thank you.
Thanks for coming on the pod.
Yeah, Adam,
thank
you. You want to come back ever again? You think?
If I did a good job, guys, I'd love to invite back.
We'll
I'll think
about it.
For the listeners, if I don't come back, you know why. Right?
Yeah, I'm gonna also put the link in our in this description. Nate wrote an awesome financial literacy for kids blog. If you guys are interested more about this, I'm going to link in there that he talked a lot about this stuff and broke it down like more specifically. So if you're interested, go read that. If you're watching this on YouTube and you're not subscribed, please subscribe. I checked the analytics. Like 80% of our viewers are not subscribed, which is kind of the case for a lot of channels.
We should remind them in the beginning too.
Okay. Yeah, I will do that. So subscribe. If you're listening this on Spotify and Apple Podcasts too, follow, subscribe there. You won't miss notification from us, and it helps us keep growing because we're going to keep doing this. So we appreciate the support. Thank you for listening and watching the Max or Dash podcast. We will catch you guys in the next one. Securities offered through Securities America Inc., member FINRA SIPC. Advisory services offered through Security America Advisors, Inc. Dash Capital Advisors and Securities America are separate entities.